I love horror, but it's tough for a tabletop game to scare me. I'm an optimist surrounded by friends. I'm always pretty sure everything will work out okay. But then I played Mothership. Holy sh**. If you're a D&D only person, don't click away just yet. I too am mainly a D&D girl, and even though I adored Mothership, you don't have to play it to take lessons from it. It has a simple 5-step horror system that you can use with any game to scare the absolute pants off your players. Let me walk you through it. Mothership is a sci-fi horror game inspired by movies like Alien and The Thing. You play as the crew of a spaceship trying to survive everything the void can throw at you. Monsters, abandoned ships, android revolts, and the knowledge that all the water you drink was once pee and sweat. I know that's true on Earth too, but it was a lot more recent on a spaceship. Tuesday Night Games first published Mothership in 2018 and then updated it in 2024 after a casual $1.4 million Kickstarter. Okay, flex. And no, they did not sponsor this video. I was already planning to make it when I ran into the designers at Gen Con and proceeded to come on way too strong. Thankfully, that didn't scare them off and they were generous enough to send me the box set. But their team deserves their flowers for making a seriously awesome game, so I want you to know this shout out is earned, not paid for. I first played Mothership in a one-shot that my friend ran. Shout out to Cal for showing me the light because I am typically a fantasy girly when it comes to my RPGs, so it probably isn't a game that I would have picked up on my own. I played an android therapist provided by corporate to boost morale, but mostly to collect data for the inevitable lawsuit. Her name was Betty Help, and I got to use my all-time favorite character voice. Please place your limes in the bagging area. I've said it before, everyone has said it, but D&D is not the ideal system for horror. That's not to say you can't do it, of course, Curse of Strahd comes to mind, but in a system where you can literally punch a vampire to death, the vibes are just a little off. Mothership, on the other hand, is built for horror. Characters are competent but fragile. Like me. That's why I always carry a sword. To compensate for the emotional fragility. Combat is actively discouraged because if you try to fight the monster head on, you will die. Just like in the movies and games that inspired Mothership, it takes ingenuity and persistence and luck to defeat the monster, and not everybody on the crew is gonna make it to the end. Some of you are just here to die in the first act to show that this is serious, guys. That said, the lessons are absolutely transferable, so if you want to level up your horror sessions in another system, it's time to start taking notes. The new Warden's Operation Manual, which is like the Mothership DM's guide, includes a system that they have ominously titled Tombs. It's an acronym, but they did a great job picking out the letters. The Tombs cycle is basically a 5-act horror template. You see this cycle reflected in a lot of your favorite horror movies once you look for it, and it provides an easy guide for creating your own horror adventures. It starts with Act 1, Transgression. We played an adventure called Another Bug Hunt, and in this game, Betty Help and the crew were sent to re-establish contact with a terraforming base that hadn't made a peep for 6 months. I'm sure they're fine, guys. They probably just left the transmitter on silent in the other room. The second we stepped inside the base, which was completely dark, door locks rusted shut, we had already transgressed. This is the part where someone, whether they know it or not, pokes the sleeping bear, or in this case, the sleeping alien carcinid. It can be a physical act, like landing on a new planet or opening the airlock on an abandoned ship, or a moral one, like deciding that Steve is not actually essential to the mission when you think about it, and we can probably just leave him behind. Sometimes the transgression isn't something your players did, but something someone else did in the past, like an old experiment, or whatever they did in the movie Yours is a sequel to. It's not your fault that you were cast in The Thing 2, oops all worms. Either way, it's the action that makes the horror possible. In The Thing, the transgression is finding a malformed humanoid corpse in a base full of dead bodies and thinking, let's just take this home with us. In Alien, the transgression might just be landing on the planet in the first place, but I choose to blame the guy that couldn't help touching the eggs. Come on, dude. In a typical adventure, we would call this the inciting incident. It's the moment when the plot kicks off. But in horror, it's usually not something that just happens to the characters. As the rulebook puts it, horrors occur because at some point a line was crossed that wasn't meant to be crossed. Once we're over that line, we are in Act 2, Omens, sinister warnings about what nightmares await you. Like when I say, and now, a word from today's sponsor. Wild Earth Dice has just launched, and I say this with love, the most ridiculous die I've ever seen. This is the One Dice. It's still in development, so this is a prototype. You might be asking, how many sides does that thing have? You sweet summer child. We're so far beyond elementary questions like that. The One Dice is an animated die with a tiny LCD screen that can generate all kinds of numbers when rolled. It can be a D6, a D20, a D100. It can even be multiple dice, so you can roll your 8d6 fireball damage all at once. Using the app, you'll be able to choose between a quick number reveal or a cinematic animation of your choice, customize your colors and haptics, and even view your roll history. And when I say roll, I'm being literal. You still roll this thing. It always lands screen side up. Listen, I know you have questions. I can sense your skepticism through the screen. You're asking, why would I replace all of my beautiful dice with this thing? And the answer is you wouldn't. Wild Earth Dice didn't make this to replace dice. They made it because it's fucking cool. It's an artifact. It's about ritual and drama and deeply overcomplicating one of mankind's simplest creations. If you're still confused, that's fine. But if you have enough theater kid energy to want this, it just launched on BackerKit at the link in the description. There are early bird offers, but they're limited, so don't miss out. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go charge my dice. Okay, back to the tomb cycle. Act 2 is Omens. In my game, the first omen was the airlock as we entered. A row of storage lockers with deep claw marks across them, definitely not human. But once we stepped into the base, that's when things really escalated. The commissary was all decorated for a birthday party, complete with a big happy birthday Olsen banner, except everything was wrecked. Bullet holes in the ceiling, blood everywhere, and then we practically tripped over a woman's severed head. God, I hope that wasn't Olsen. Talk about the worst birthday ever. Omens are the horror's calling cards. They're signs, warnings, and increasingly unsubtle hints that things are not okay around here. Sometimes it's a nightmare or a vision, sometimes it's a rumor being passed between NPCs, and sometimes it's just the classic corpse with a big ol' hole in its chest. Whatever form the omens take, they're here to say, hey, have you considered maybe being a little nervous? Sweet summer child. That's my secret. I'm always nervous. Omens serve two big functions in the game. First, they build tension. This is a classic horror movie trope. You gotta give hints about the monster before it shows up, because then when it finally does show up, it'll feel much scarier. It takes time to build anticipation, and that's a big reason this act is here. The second reason is that omens are also clues. An omen is a clue to a mystery, and if players can solve that mystery, maybe they won't die. Or at least, maybe they'll die later. Listen, in survival horror, we gotta take what we can get. Pay attention to this part. It's okay if your players solve the clues. That's why they're there. This is a game where the horror is so incredibly dangerous and powerful, your players getting a leg up is not gonna turn the whole adventure into a cakewalk. There's a great tip later in the guide that I love for any tabletop game. It says, if they ask the right question, give them the right answer. You're the warden, the game master. You have all the information. It's your job to communicate that information so your players can make informed decisions. Remember, player characters are not incompetent. They're good at their jobs. It's just that fight a parasitic alien monster was not in the job description. Don't be afraid to let them succeed at stuff. I promise it won't ruin the game. In our adventure, after checking out the commissary and examining the body, we heard a noise. Hoping it was a survivor, but also pretty sure it was something much worse, we moved towards it, which means we had just entered Act 3, Manifestation. In our game, this happened in the garage. We found an armored vehicle, nice, and a survivor, even nicer. He was a Marine, standing knee-deep in a muddy pit in the middle of the floor, just digging. When we tried to talk to him, he didn't respond, and we all had that moment where we were like, we probably shouldn't touch him, right? But what were we gonna do, just leave him there? So we touched him. That's when his head snapped backwards and these 8-foot crab legs erupted out of his neck and it started running at us, wearing the Marine's broken corpse like a human onesie. I cannot describe the sound that came out of me when this happened. All the buildup made it much scarier when we were finally face to exoskeleton with this creature. Also, not to brag, but it made this horrifying shrieking sound and I went, sorry, I didn't quite get that. And I'm pretty sure that's the biggest laugh I have ever gotten out of a game group and will ever get again. This is what the book calls the manifestation, where the horror finally reveals itself. This is the big moment. The killer attacks, the disease takes hold, or in our case, a crab alien jumps out, like, surprise! Happy birthday, Olsen! For the first time, players see the horror in its full, grotesque glory. This is the image that's supposed to stick with them, and trust me, it does. The more you can share about how it looks and what it smells like and the terrible sounds that it makes, the more memorable it'll be for players. An important thing to remember here is that the manifestation is a symptom. Think back to the transgression. What line was crossed, and how does that shape how the horror looks and acts? Having a scary monster is good, but having a thematic monster is even better. Alien is a perfect example of this, because the transgression was disturbing a nest of eggs, the next generation of alien babies. So much of the horror of the movie is referencing the inherent body horror of pregnancy, having your body invaded by some other being, the body changing and distorting, and then finally the violence of birth. I'm not saying Alien is the reason I don't want to have kids, but I am saying we're on the same page. This is also where you have to remember this is not D&D, and if you're planning to use this 5-act cycle in D&D, you'll need to be really thoughtful about how you handle handle combat here. To quote the rulebook, in Mothership, every monster is a boss monster. This is not the part where the horror jumps out, the party rolls initiative, and 3 minutes later, everybody's looting crab legs for dinner. This is the part where the players, if they're lucky, survive the horror. If they want to defeat it, they need to move into Act 4, Banishment. In our game, we did manage to wound the crab thing before it skittered off through the garage door into the night, but we were pretty messed up. It was very clear that if it had stuck around, we would have gotten our own carcinization glow-ups real fast. So we limped deeper into the base in search of medical supplies and information about how these monsters worked and what they were vulnerable to. So when it came back to ambush us, this time we were ready. Well, readier, at least. This is the part where the horror has fully arrived, and now it is your player's problem. The dam has broken, and now these omens have become full-on threats. Everything ramps up, more attacks, more infections, more deaths. The players are on the clock now, scrambling to figure out how to weaken or escape or destroy the horror before it destroys them. Sometimes that means killing it, but not always. Your story might call for appeasing the creature, or locking it away so they can deal with it in the sequel. Even though Acts 3 and 4 sit next to each other, they are not the same. In a horror movie, the scene where you meet the monster for the first time is never the scene where you kill it. Act 3 is there to show you what it can do, to establish how much danger you're in. Then comes Act 4, where you're being hunted, gathering clues, maybe nursing your wounds, and preparing for a final confrontation. It's a chance for that tension to build up again, and it makes sure that the last battle, if you survive long enough to reach it, feels climactic. The players might destroy the horror, or they might not. Either way, that is not the end of the cycle. A good horror story still needs a 5th act, Slumber. If the players were successful, this is where the horror relents, for now. And of course, if they failed, then the horror accomplished its goal and moves on to the next phase of its evolution. Either way, this 5-act structure is called a cycle because it never really ends. The monster isn't gone, it's just dormant, waiting for the next group of idiots to stumble in and transgress, taking us back to Act 1. Slumber is an essential step because this isn't heroic fantasy. You don't get to pat yourselves on the back and go, "We did it, team! The evil is defeated," and then go live happily ever after. Horror leaves scars. Maybe you sealed the monster away, but it left somebody infected. Maybe the evil is restrained, but there's always the looming threat that somebody else will stumble on it later and release it again. Ultimately, a big part of what makes horror feel like horror is dread, and that dread shouldn't be completely gone when the credits roll. At the end of Alien, you're relieved that Ripley survived, but at the same time, that was just one xenomorph, and it wiped out nearly the entire crew. Remember the hundreds of eggs on that ship? Yeah, sleep tight. And of course, if you had fun, this is also a neat little setup for a fresh crew, a new timeline, and a shiny new manifestation of the nightmare they know and love. Whether it's next week or 100 years from now, there will always be another transgression and another cycle. That's what we in the entertainment biz call a franchise opportunity. So that's the tomb cycle, but even if all the plot points are there, this is an incomplete recipe for horror because it needs one final ingredient to work: tension. Thankfully, the guidebook includes a short list of 5 tips for building and maintaining tension, and it's a great resource. The first tip is to ease in. Don't open with the monster right away. Give your players at least a scene or 2 of normalcy so they can figure out what the baseline is for their character before things start to disrupt it. Also, those 5 acts, they are not created equal. Transgression and Slumber are quick hits that frame the story, but you should actually be spending most of the game on the Omens phase. You know that iconic scene where the alien bursts out of John Hurt's chest? That's over an hour into the movie. Dread is a slow burn, so it's important to give it time to simmer. When the monster does appear, the designers warn us away from long encounters. I'm looking at you, Dungeon Masters. Have the thing show up, do some damage, and then disappear. That way, you have space to build that tension back up before it jump scares the party again. This is probably my favorite tip: play it straight. Your players can and will crack jokes, but you need to stay grounded and serious. As somebody who thinks I'm pretty funny, I am often guilty of cracking a joke during a dramatic scene. But when the laughter dies down and the game master goes right back to describing the crab thing running directly towards us, I can testify that I refocus pretty quick. Finally, treat everything like it's happening in the real world. Most people don't react to horrifying situations like heroes. They react like someone who is scared and wants to live. If you play NPCs as scared, that's contagious, and your players will start to feel it too. The bottom line is, tension is fragile. As a game master in a horror game, it's your responsibility to build it, maintain it, and keep turning the heat up until it boils over. That's what's gonna make this 5-act cycle feel like horror instead of just another dungeon crawl. There you have it, a simple 5-step system for horror adventures that'll send shivers down your players' spines. If you want to dig into Mothership yourself, I have linked their website in the description. If you're trying to bring horror into your D&D games specifically, I've also got a whole whole video on that, which goes deeper into specific tricks that you can use to create those same vibes in a fantasy setting, plus 2 common pitfalls to avoid. And remember, need help? Call Betty Help. She's a licensed therapist who's recording every single word you say and then forwarding it to HR. For quality assurance purposes, of course.